Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm TX141, but as always you can call me Paul. Welcome you to another personal video on our channel today. Now this is a rather special video because it celebrates my attendance of the PC Gamer Weekender, which was hosted from Saturday the 5th of March 2016 through to Sunday the 6th of March 2016. Hope I've got those dates right. Now what exactly was the event for the uninitiated? Well, it was held in merry old London of the United Kingdom, down the Old Truman Brewery. I can never say brewery right the first time, weird. But essentially the event was dedicated to PC gaming, as it says on the tin, and it was hosted by PC Gamer, which is a group that put together a magazine, a very popular one in the United Kingdom, and I believe in a good portion of the Western world and the Eastern world to an extent. Now the event wasn't just celebrating video gaming. You had a lot of games on display, games that have just come out, or games that have come out in the last year, let's say, such as Dawn of War 2 Retribution. You had Alien Isolation. You also had Killing Floor 2, which is sort of in a semi-beta phase, I believe. And you had a lot of beta titles which are not open in public beta, but instead are in closed betas or closed alphas at the moment. To give you an example, there was Warhammer Eternal Crusade, Homefront the Revolution, and you get the picture. Now outside of the video gaming theatre, there are also companies such as Scan present, who had all their hardware kits there. So there were some high-end PCs. I think there was a PC on display for £3,000 which had 4 graphics cards in it in order to support multi-monitor gaming, and they were showcasing Blacklight Retribution, quite an antiquated first-person shooter these days if I remember my games correctly, and that was on 3 monitors and that was impressive. And there was also a number of other exhibits dedicated to you, i.e. you as a PC gamer. Say for example you work on a budget build, so you don't want to spend more than £600 on your gaming PC. They had experts there to give you tips on how to build the best PC possible for your budget, or if you're more of an entrepreneur with your £2,000 to spare, you could essentially ask them, what's the best I can get for my money, what are the myths about having too much RAM, what are the best graphics cards, etc. And on top of that, there are a number of presentations given by developers and people within the gaming industry. So there were the developers, I believe, of Total War Warhammer present. They gave a presentation on a staged custom battle, I believe, but it was absolutely fantastic to watch. And they were talking about how the game is developing and the content available via an open Q&A. And there are other companies there, or games I should say, and their representative companies, such as the guys behind Star Citizen and I believe Hitman as well. Now, I didn't just go alone to this event. I went with a couple of friends. I went with quite a group. Some of the guys didn't mind being involved in the sort of filming and whatnot. Other guys weren't too keen on it. So the 2 friends I'm going to mention, you guys have already heard them in games. One of them is Scorpion on Fire, or Callum, as we call him in Rainbow Six Siege, because that's his name. And also Nick, MB Hatred, Rainbow Six Siege once again. And they were an absolute pleasure to go with. And to be honest, why did I go to the event exactly? It wasn't for any particular games. I mean, there was the Wargaming booth. Wargaming.net had a booth dedicated to World of Tanks, World of Warships and Master of Orion, but we'll come on to that a little bit later. I went there just because I'd never been to a PC gaming convention before, or any sort of expo of that type, and also because it was a really exciting event to go to meet up with a subscriber of the channel, and at the same time just to see what games are out there. And I'll tell you one thing, the Wargaming booth was not my main highlight, oh no, not by a long shot, although I have got something special planned for you all later on in this video, and this is going to be a rather long video. So as a result, what I've done, I've put a number of timestamps in the description of this video so you can jump to the things that you are interested in, because I can understand that a 50-minute video, or however long this turns out, may not be interesting to you all, as you may not have the time available. So please feel free to use the description in order to jump to the bits that are interesting. But if you have got the time, I strongly recommend you watch the entirety of this video, because there was a lot more there than I anticipated, and hopefully my enthusiasm, my excitement as the day went on will rub off on you. And to give you an idea of how the day started, I had to be up in London at 9 o'clock in the morning, quarter to 9 in the morning, to meet up with the guys, and we made our way there. And the picture you're about to see is me sitting on my train, which was delayed by 10 minutes, and I'm trying to put on a brave face in honesty. I've only had 4.5 hours sleep, and I really don't feel great. And as soon as I got to the event, all the tiredness faded away and the excitement came out. So, let's move on to our first item of this. So our first item then is what was really on at the event. Well, to give you an idea, I've already said there was a mixture of gaming and hardware. The bottom floor of the event was mainly for hardware demonstrations, so you had NVIDIA with the HTC Vive there, as I've said. On top of that, you also had Scan. Now, what was brilliant about Scan, the hardware company, was the fact that they put on a brilliant display for Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3. Not for the game itself, however. What they did, they had a table of 8 rigs, so desktop PCs. Now, at one end of the table, you had your £2,000 rig. Now, that's for someone who's got the money to spare and wants to spend it on a good gaming rig to get them right up to the top of the generation at the moment. As you went down the table, the PCs got gradually cheaper, all the way down to the other end where you had a £600 PC. And this was including the keyboards as well, and whatnot. So, what was very good about this was it showed that if you have a budget that you want to try and stick to, you don't have to spend a lot to get a good gaming PC. But if you have the money to spare, you can start adding in additional components, and they had exactly which components were in which PC and the individual prices listed on each computer. And as you went along, you saw how the graphics got better, but at the same time, it wasn't this massive leap that sometimes gets quoted. It was just a gradual improvement. And having 8 people there playing a local game and all the different rigs was quite nice as well. Quite jokey in some respects, especially when you've got a lot of people sitting on the other side of the table trying to shoot one another. It's local gaming. So on top of that, you also had a whole stand where you could take in your own PC or watch people putting PCs together and ask questions on what makes a good gaming PC, what myths do I have to worry about. So say, for example, is having more than 8 gigabytes of RAM important when I build a gaming PC, or is it more important for the video rendering side of things? If I'm a video editor or a YouTuber, you had that there. And then when you went up to the first floor, you had the gaming floor, essentially. Now, this was where things got impressive, because there are a number of companies showcasing games which are going to be coming out in the future. Team 17 were there, for example, with their Worms W.M.D. If everyone remembers Worms and Worms Armageddon from the PlayStation 1 days, I'm sure you all do. That's Team 17 for you. Brilliant bunch of guys, but more on that in a bit. You had Sega there. They were showcasing a number of games. It was 15 years of Total War. So if you remember Shogun Total War, the original on PC, and they had all the Total War games leading up to Total War Warhammer, which was on display in a beta form which you could play. You also had games such as Company of Heroes 2, Dawn of War 2 Retribution, and the standalone Dawn of War 2, either one before Retribution. I've said about Alien Isolation. You had Capcom there with 2 very impressive games. I think they might have had a couple more, but the ones I played in particular were Street Fighter V, which has come out recently, and I'm not very good at fighting games, as you're going to see. You also had Umbrella Corps, which is a very controversial first-person shooter title. I think it's first-person shooter, or it's third-person shooter with some first-person elements in there. Again, my memory's not great, quite tired. But essentially, it's a controversial title because it steers away from what Resident Evil was about. It's more of a competitive multiplayer game where it's 2 teams of 3 rather than the survival horror that you're used to with Resident Evil. But I'll come on to that again in a bit. You also had Wargaming.net's booth there, and they were showcasing World of Warships, World of Tanks, and Masters of Orion. You had a number of other companies there as well. I can't remember the names, but they were showcasing Homefront, the Revolution. You also had Warhammer, Eternal Crusade. You had a RuneScape game, I can't remember the full name of it there. Some sort of card deck game, I think it was called Deckbound. Pardon me. You had a lot of indie developers there as well, including one indie developer who had integrated Oculus Rift into the setup of their game. I didn't get a chance to play it. You had Prison Architect there, and you really get the picture, but instead of me talking about it any further, let me show you what was on display as we were walking around as a trio, and then when I walked around as an individual. Whilst Callum was stuck in the queue for Dark Souls 3, and Nick was on a machine somewhere, if I remember correctly.
What? There's a thing called bot Call of Duty. You guys will say hello to the camera? Hey dude. So Nick, what are you here for?
To kill you.
Okay, seriously?
That's booty.
Oh, what about yourself, Callum?
Dark Souls.
Dogs.
Yeah. Dark Souls. Warhammer. CM Storm combination of mouse and keyboard.
I see.
£35.
Okay, so I hope those clips gave you given you an idea, I should say, of what was in store for us all. And also, if you're wondering why I'm providing subtitles at the bottom when we're speaking, it's simply because it was a very noisy event and my camera's not very good at focusing on particular sound, i.e. from myself and my colleagues, or indeed from the people I spoke to. More on that later. So, as a result, I'm going to be putting subtitles in this video and hopefully they'll help. But anyway, so the games I played and the games that I had a look at in terms of just watching people play them or speaking to the developers or the media representatives that were there. I'm going to go through them all, the ones that I had the chance to play or watch but I didn't record anything because the developers were either not willing to let me record, which is understandable, especially if the game's in closed beta or alpha condition. They don't want to give away too much at this stage and they want to do the official press releases, and I always ask for permission simply because I have a lot of respect for these guys. It's a lot on the line, and we'll come into the stuff that I actually managed to record a little bit later, but we digress. And so we begin with, I believe it is Dawn of War 2 Retribution. Now, I'm not going to go into this for too much because it's a game that's been out a while. But for the uninitiated, Dawn of War 2 and its expansion pack, which is also standalone Retribution, are real-time strategy games based around squad play in the Warhammer 40k universe. That's the desktop game of models which you can put together, and it's dice roll based and whatnot. Pardon me. Now, I played the original Dawn of War on PC, so that was Dawn of War, then there was Winter Assault, the expansion pack, Dark Crusade, the standalone expansion, and then there was Soulstorm, which I never played and I heard a lot of negative reviews about. When I played Dawn of War 2 Retribution, I played the Last Stand mode, which is the mode where you play as a hero character online with a group of people, so there were a number of us all in a line at desks at the event. I think there were 3 of us. Nick was over my shoulder because he's a seasoned Dawn of War 2 person by comparison to myself, and we had quite a laugh playing the mode where when you play as hero characters you can upgrade yourselves, but we were in fully upgraded condition for the purposes of being a press event, and the enemies get tougher over sequential waves. And it was really good fun to play, and I'll definitely consider getting Dawn of War 2 and this standalone expansion if they're on sale in the Steam sale in the summer, most likely. And how many times do I just fit sale into a single sentence? But we move on. So the next item was Dark Souls 3. Now this was a game, as you're already aware from this video, that Callum was very interested in. I'm not a Dark Souls person, but I'm not keen on the premise, anything like Skyrim. I know it's first person or the third person Dark Souls here. it would probably be a struggle to get me into it, even if I did try sitting at a desk. And it was the most queued for game out of the lot. I'm going to say this now. From what I saw, the queue was always at a fixed length, and it was usually about twice the length of any other queue at the event, which shows you how popular Dark Souls 3 is. The graphics looked phenomenal, and I believe they were showing a sort of tutorial level as part of the press event, which some people completed in under half an hour, some people were taking 2 hours to get through, and it was quite interesting to see the seasoned veterans of Dark Souls just rip through it and see the very new people to Dark Souls take their time on it, and some people had to be forced off in the end. But it did look a very interesting game. It's not something that I was particularly interested in, but the graphics did look phenomenal, and it seems to be a sort of hack and slash magic game whereby you're facing off against enemies that are usually a lot bigger than yourself, swordsmen, some sort of demonic creatures. I think you faced off against some sort of dancer boss as part of the press event gameplay. And it looks really good on a graphical level, but it's not a title I'll be interested in for any time in the near future. Okay, so moving on then, I'll just check the list. Right, so the next item was Warhammer Total War. Now, I didn't get a chance to play it, colleague Nick did, and he really enjoyed it. He's quite a fan of the Warhammer universe, if I remember correctly, and at the same time of the Total War game. I've been a big fan of the Total War games all the way up to Rome Total War. I then just haven't really played any of the titles since then, such as Medieval 2. Now, as a result, what this means essentially is that you've got a real-time strategy game, and there was the big celebration, obviously, of 15 years of Total War at the event. And you're combining the real-time strategy game, which was associated, quite interestingly, with a significant amount of historical realism, i.e. you have specific units crafted for a specific purpose based on their historical counterparts, such as you had the Roman centurions in Rome Total War, the spearmen, etc. And then you're bringing in the fantasy universe of Warhammer. Now, we're talking about the, I assume we call it early Warhammer, so not the 40k universe, but the one before you get all the future technology and whatnot. I'm not very good with Warhammer, ladies and gentlemen, so I apologise for offending any of you who are big Warhammer fans, whether of the 40k or the standard universe, and you want to put me straight in the comments. I would like you to, if you feel inclined. And essentially, you're moving away from that historical concept. You've got all the lore, however, and it looks as though you're going to have all the lore in terms of the campaign and whatnot, which is played out on a turn-based map. And as you go to conquer territories after building up your bases and your armies, you then travel to someone else's land, and it goes into the real-time strategy battles of large armies coalescing on the battlefield. But you've now got the concept of magic and priests and whatnot being brought into the game. So you've now got significant hero characters. You've got people on Wyverns, I think that's how you pronounce it, Wyreven, Wyverns. But it says you've got them going onto the battlefield, and a lot of people originally, when they heard about this, thought, well, this is going to be really difficult for Sega, I think it's Sega and Creative Assembly, to pull off, because you're taking the historical side, the real-time strategy, and now you're integrating it into the fantasy universe. And the press battle that was displayed was really good to watch, because you had the magical elements in there and the heroes, but they did not distort the game as much as I personally thought they might. And it made for a very interesting match. And what was great about the press event, and I'm sure I'll be able to find the live stream of it, which I'll link in the description of this video, was that two of the more publicly known developers and representatives were there showcasing the game and leading the match, i.e. controlling the team that we got to witness the battle from. But they asked the audience for participations. They asked us what strategy should be employed. And when the first person who was asked for a strategy said, let's go full retreat, it just did not turn out well from that point onwards. But I'll let you watch that if I can find a link. So that was a really interesting game. It's not one I'm going to be buying, unfortunately, because I'm sort of moving away from the real-time strategy world. I'm stuck with War Thunder, World of Warships, Rainbow Six Siege, and that theatre at the moment. Perhaps in the future, but I would personally like to stick to games such as Medieval 2, the more historical side rather than the fantasy side. And there were a number of questions raised in the Q&A after the battle of people from, I would say, that background, the more historical Total War side, who were sort of asking what's going to bring me into this game, i.e. what can I get out of it compared to the titles I've watched and played previously. So it's interesting to see that dynamic in the room, and it wasn't as though it was a massive elephant in the room. It was good to bring it out, and in the end I think some people went home very satisfied and thinking to themselves, you know, I'm going to give that a go. But for me personally, I'm not. Or at least for now. So moving on from Warhammer Total War, I had the chance to witness some gameplay of Homefront the Revolution. Now, to explain what Homefront the Revolution is and the preceding game, because it is a sequel to the original Homefront. The original Homefront was a first-person shooter. I believe it was not open world, it was a set of missions based in the United States, hence the Homefront concept, whereby the United States has been invaded by North Korea, or a Korean People's Army, I can't remember the exact term used, and essentially you're fighting back against the invasion. Now, when the game came out, it did rather well, but a lot of people said, much like what I personally said about Homefront, well, it's just competing in a market with Call of Duty, Halo and other games like that. And the premise of America being invaded by a foreign nation and you fighting back is something which was sold in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 and 3. If you've played the games or you've read about the campaigns, you'll know that a lot of the missions as part of the American forces were based around you fighting back against the Russians who invaded your home territory. So what does Homefront the Revolution bring to the table? Well, I had the chance to speak to a number of the guys from the media team representing the guys who work behind Homefront the Revolution, and on top of that also some of the community team. Now, I wasn't allowed to record any of the gameplay, unfortunately, because it's in closed beta still, and it's not a beta which is being released to the wider public. The launch date for the game is the 20th of May 2016, and the game is being sold once again as a first-person shooter. And once again, you are in America, and the Korean People's Army have taken over, I believe it's the eastern part of America. I'm not 100% sure on the plot details, but the idea here is, instead of having the closed-off missions, you are fighting back against the oppressive regime of the Koreans by gradually inciting the revolution. So it's an open world, you have to scavenge around for ammunition, and you're fighting a sort of guerrilla warfare, essentially. And that is the selling point of the game. When I was talking to the guys behind it, they were saying that's the key aspect they want to get across, that this is not another Call of Duty. This is not another first-person shooter where you run around going gun-ho down a couple of alleyways, pop a couple of people in the head, face off against the final boss, and that's the game over and go to the multiplayer. Instead, the concept is that you have to scavenge for ammunition, you have to scavenge for supplies, and you're gradually fighting back. And as you fight back against your oppressors, the people around you will become more receptive to the concept of the revolution rather than bowing down to the regime. So it sounds like an interesting concept, and the gameplay I got to see was actually rather impressive from a graphical standpoint. It was a very bleak game, I will be honest with you. It was a very grey and brown game. But to contextualise that, the textures I saw were very detailed for a game which is going to be released in just over 2 months' time. And it was very impressive on the rig I got to see. It was a very high-end rig, and it was one of the showcase rigs. You didn't have any specifications on the rigs that were displayed by the developers and the games companies that were there, but I would say they were rigs that were able to run the games at least 90% of their maximum graphical output. So it looks an impressive game. As for me, because I've moved away from first-person shooters in the majority of cases, apart from, say, Rainbow Six Siege, I'm not going to be too interested in it, but if you are a fan of first-person shooters, it may be a game for you to check out. And to put it in a nutshell, it seems to be trying to cross the sort of breed between Far Cry and Call of Duty with guerrilla warfare mixed in, so might be one to check out. But we must move on. Okay, so next up on the list is a game which really surprised me, and that was Umbrella Corps. Now, I've gone away and had a little read about it to make sure I don't get it wrong here with Umbrella Corps, but essentially it is a game by Capcom in the Resident Evil universe, and it's pretty far from what the Resident Evil universe is all about. I had a chance to play it competitively with Nick. We played as part of a team of 3 against another team of 3 at the premise, so it was a local game, and we had quite the laugh and enjoyed it. It's a third-person shooter where you are part of an Umbrella Corps team against another Umbrella Corps team in usually a facility or a map. Now the thing is, you have objectives. We played the multi-match mode, so there were 5 rounds, or it could go up to 5 rounds. It's a best of 5. And after each round, the objective changes. So one round was, I think, we had to kill a certain number of opponents. The next round was we had to kill the VIP, so there was an important player on the enemy team. We had to kill them 5 times, and it swapped every time the VIP was killed. Another one was essentially capture the flag with 6 different flags, and you had to gradually take them back to your base. You get the picture. Now, you had a number of classes, different weapon setups. I only had a chance to play around with one. This game is, I believe, not an official release yet, or it's on the verge of being an official release. I didn't get a chance to speak to the devs about this one. I literally jumped on the machine because I thought, well, this is a way of killing some time. And what surprised me is the fact You're in a facility as part of a team of 3 versus another team of 3 in a third-person shooter where you've also got tons of zombies running around and loads of zombified dogs and other things. So that means you not only have to juggle the enemy team and defeat them, but you've also got to watch your own back and that of your teammates as the zombies come after you as well. And obviously when the shooting starts, the zombies hear it and they start coming towards you, when at first you can pretty much run past them and it doesn't really bother you. Now this game is a really controversial title because of the fact it deviates so much from the survival horror experience of the Resident Evil games, although Resident Evil 6 in itself wasn't really survival horror, most people would say. You're probably all aware of that if you are a Resident Evil fan, of how Resident Evil 6 was a departure from what 5 and 4 were. But at the same time, whilst it felt a very Call of Duty-ish game, Umbrella Corps, it was really enjoyable. The pace was incredibly fast because it was a small map. Well, the ones I played on were very small maps. The 3 versus 3 action meant you always had to watch your teammates' backs. The fact you had the zombies coming around as well meant that you had this unknown element. Sometimes you'd be engaging a member of the enemy team and they'd just die because what actually happened was you were so busy engaging one another, a zombie came up behind my opponent and killed him. And then I'd usually turn around and have a zombified dog rip my throat out. So it was a really good game and I will definitely keep my eyes open on it, simply because if it's going to be a sort of one of those subtitles for the Resident Evil genre or series of games, and the cost isn't too bad, I reckon I could get a lot of fun out of it, and I would love to cast some of that game for you. Let's move on. Okay, so now here's another unexpected title. It's Worms W.M.D. Now, some of you may be asking, why is it unexpected? I mean, Worms, you could play that anywhere. I did not know Team 17 were making this game, and at the same time, I did not know Team 17 were going to be at the event. Now, Worms W.M.D. is an attempt, and I spoke to other developers about this, and in fact, funny story, I'll tell you this. So it was towards the end of the day, and again, this video isn't really in chronological order in terms of what we're analysing. It was towards the end of the day, I went round to the Worms machines, because I'd seen them all day, and I thought to myself, wait a minute, this really looks different, and it's had quite a buzz around it. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the machines were clearing up, so I thought, you know what, let's go over and give it a go. And I asked one of the people who was there, one of the media people, I think, are one of the Worms machines free? Now, she had only heard me say, are the Worms free? Now, I didn't realise you had the opportunity to win yourself a Worm plush. Childish, but at the same time, a worthwhile memento. You had the chance to win yourself a Worm plush if you beat one of the developers at the game. So she went away, and I thought she was just checking if the machines were free to play, and she went and grabbed one of the developers, and I had a 1 versus 1 match, 4 Worms versus 4, against one of the devs. And I couldn't catch his name, however he was a really great guy to talk to, because as we were playing, he was taking me through the fact that the game's gone back to the 2-dimensional interface that we know and love from Worms Armageddon and Worms World Party, all PS1 games and ported over onto the PC and others. When you went to games such as Worms 3D, obviously you had the 3-dimensional space, let him fall over, and then you had Worms 4 Mayhem, Worms Fort Siege Under Fire, and it got a little bit away from what Worms truly was, where you just have your friends round on your multi-tap, you'd have that single controller you'd pass around to one another, and you'd blow the crap out of each other on a map, which was highly destructible, and you couldn't really get inside the buildings, so you always had putting your worms on top of the buildings or around the scenery. But it was a good laugh. It was a sort of party game. You had your single-player campaign, which was always hard as hell as you went along, or at least in my experience, and it brought back a load of childhood memories starting to play it. But as I started playing it, what was interesting was the fact that the gentleman took me through what they tried to go back to. So the original Worms feeling, the 2D interface, all the standard weapons that we know and love, the bazooka, the Armageddon, the concrete donkey, all hail the concrete donkey. And then he explained to me the changes that they've made to try and keep the game fresh. And there were 2 core changes. Well, sorry, 3 I should really say. The first was the fact that you had vehicles which your worms could get in, such as tanks and helicopters. I got the chance to sample those, and they weren't game destroying. They were actually quite unique in the fact they gave your worm extra protection, but when those vehicles blow up, your worm loses an absolute ton of health. And again, I'm going into this because I'm a massive Worms fan, especially of the older generation Worms games. The second aspect was similar. It was mountable turrets. You'd have turrets around the battlefield that you could shoot and do a lot of damage to enemy worms, but at the same time you're in a fixed position, so you're a sitting duck, so you have to try and balance out being on the turret at the right time and at the right place. Pardon me. And the third aspect, now this was the best aspect, and this is what instantly said to me, you know what, I'm going to check this title when it comes out and probably buy it at full price. And that was that you could put your worm inside the buildings. Now, for any of you who remember the original windmill map, I'll put a screenshot up on here whilst we're talking. If any of you remember the original windmill map from Worms Armageddon, you'll know there was an absolutely massive windmill that you couldn't go inside, but you could put all your worms on it. Now imagine if you could go inside that windmill, you could give yourself cover, it opens up a whole other dimension of the map, and that's exactly what they've gone for, that you can get your worms inside buildings to give them cover. And if you are playing online rather than between people around a given PC or a given TV, your opponent doesn't have the ability to see who's in the building or what condition the worm's in. Obviously when you're playing as a little cluster of 4 around a single monitor, you know that, but they still get the cover element. And it opens up this whole new world of, you know what, I could never go in that building before, but now I can get my worm in there. I might have to do some double jumps to get him up to the top floor. But it means that I don't always have to think to myself, I've got a jetpack or I'm fixed to one side of the map because this building's a massive bit of terrain I can't get over unless I've got a special bit of equipment. Sounds good fun, and I managed to beat the developer with only 1 health left on a stricken worm because they had a rule in place whereby you could use the concrete donkey if you were in that specific situation. Now I don't know if that rule was made up right at that moment in the time so that I was allowed to win, or whether it was just pure fate. But I'll tell you one thing, that guy was good at his worms and he knew exactly what he was on about and he sold the title for me. So thanks dude if you ever watch this video. But unfortunately we have to move away from worms and move on to something a little bit more climactic.